This is a bit untidy, this one here, because I was knocking up some mortar and I didn't clean it. It helps if you've got a bucket, metal bucket, and it's full of aggregate sand. You can use sand or you can use pea shingle, and you put that in there with some water and you just spin it up and it clean the blades. Now, is it going to work, my little darling? No. Maybe it's not such a good idea after all. Oh, hang on, there we go. Right.
So just that, as it stands, is no different to maybe using cement. There's nothing really particularly dangerous about it. Obviously, you treat that in the same way you use cement.
Yeah. Some people have said you can use a cement mixer for using mortar, but you're not getting that compression or squeezing together. And some people say if you're using a cement mixer, you'd be better taking the blades out and putting in a football full of cement, so it's like a counter cannonball, and it rolls around, and that will compress your mortar. But to be honest, I've done so much building work and so much repointing. This whole house has been repointed, and we normally get somebody dedicated to doing the mortar mixing, and they will be mortar mixing all day long to supply the mortar for the bricklayers. And if we just see, there's no water's been added in this, and this is getting a bit sloppy. And the way to tell whether your mortar, obviously I'd work harder than this, make sure that it's all compressed, and you have to really make sure that your mortar is really up to standard, but we're not far off it now. You could start laying bricks or plastering a wall with this pretty much as we've got there now. If you were plastering a wall, now you'd be introducing horsehair and you'd be teasing it in like that and knocking it in with a lime. You don't want to use a spinner when you're using horsehair, because all the horsehair will end up on the end of the spinner and not in the mix. You want the hair, if you're doing a haired mix, what's known as a haired mix, you want it to look like a bath sponge. When you get your bath sponge out and you think, oh my God, how did all that hair get in my bath sponge? Really, you want the mortar to look the same. So, when you pick it up, it's got loads of hair all over the place. And that, when it goes off, it acts as a binder. Now, the thing to remember with the horsehair when you're doing ceilings, and we'll cover this again if we do ceilings and using horsehair, is that you have to hair it as you're using it. There's no good hairing it and putting it in a tub and keeping it for 6 months, because
where would you buy the hair from? Where would you get the hair from?
You can buy it readily available.
From where?
From the same suppliers that supply your lime. Yeah, you buy horsehair or goat hair. I've got a big bag of it, but I'll show you that when we do plastering. The problem is that you don't want to hair it too soon. It has to be as you're knocking the lime up, because the lime is caustic and it will dissolve the hair. So I had a problem job where the ceiling had fallen off, and they said, they'd knock their lime up properly, they'd use all the right ingredients, but the ceiling failed. Why would that be? And it can only be a number of things. It can be the mix was too many coats, too green. That means you put too many coats, too thick. But I narrowed it down, and it seemed as though they had haired it 6 months before they'd actually used it, and the hair had dissolved. So it didn't have a binder to hold it together. You don't need a binder when you're doing brickwork, because the bricks are compressing each of the other brick.
So essentially, that is your base for anything. So you
yeah.
Use that inside, outside. But you're going to use. If you're doing something inside, you're going to add extra things to it.
Yeah, and that should be okay. So that's a test of a good mortar mix. It's like putting a baking mix above your head. I'm not going to do that, but it should stick to the trowel. So we know that's all right. If it gets too sloppy and too wet, that's when you put some of this material in here. You can either add some more sand, or you can put in that kind of material in there. We've got in here, chuck that in, chuck in your seashells. And look, there's an oyster shell there, so that's come out of one of the other mixes. That can go in, and then what you do is just see if I can do a small quantity in the centre here.
It's nice to think that perhaps in a couple of 100 years' time, somebody's doing something similar to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
An oyster shell and a mussel shell.
Yeah, so I can't understand it. There's all this stuff in there. Now, if we have a quick look at that and see what we've got in there this time. So you'll see that if that was to dry, let's see if we can do this. Doesn't really work, but what you would see is that you see there'll be all these bits of you see a bit of mussel shell in there, little bits of black popping up, but it all helps to mix. And some of these, some of these Roman mixes and some of these medieval mixes, they were so good because they had all manner of impurities in there, and lots of people wouldn't dream of putting this stuff back in again because they think they want pure mixes. But this is pretty, with that stuff in there, it's going to be a fantastic mix. And from our experience, these make the best mixes that when we're doing brickwork and doing ceilings, it goes off nice and hard. And we were doing some exterior repointing up there, and we wanted a mortar that would really kind of weather quite well on the roof, and also chimney stacks, flaunching on chimney pots. So if I was doing around the chimney pots, the flaunching, that's the mortar work, smoothing off, I'd use something like this that's got lots of bits of shell in it. And I mean, look at that. I mean, it's just asking, isn't it, to go back in that mix. I just love it. I think it's fantastic. Anyway, that's that kiddie. We've still got the water that's left over, so that's the putty mix. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tub this one up in here. You can mix the two together. You can put a bit of this stuff in with here I never have. I just don't like doing it. And I know lots of plasterers and lots of builders, and they say, we gauge it out with NHL because then that weakens the MHL and it sets this off better. Excuse me, but in my experience, I've never had problems with my mortar mixers. So I like keeping them a bit purer. Now you can tub this up, okay, and when you've done that, you can put that water back in here that we've got, and it'll settle over the top, and then we can use this in 6 months or a year's time. It's a jolly good mix. And what I would normally do is that if I'm working, obviously clients are paying me to do this, so I get a drain pipe, plastic drain pipe, cut it into sections which are about 20 millimeters, and then we lay the cut pieces out and we fill up the you put a bit of engine oil in there first of all as a releasing agent, and then we do these biscuits, which is what I showed you over there before. So then theoretically you will have a biscuit for all the jobs that you've worked on. It'll have the lime specification, how much lime you use, whether it's putty, whether it's hot lime, whether it's bag lime, did you put any added material in it, any of this crunched up stuff, which is an unknown factor. You can say, yeah, there was 10% of that or 20%, and then you've got some idea if you have to replicate that in the future of what you're doing. But it's also a record of your work. Now, one would expect I've got a vast library, but I haven't done that. I've only told people they should do it, because when you're mixing up, you tub it up, you get you make the next one. I did start out a number of years ago, monitoring everything, get all the biscuits, and all of a sudden you think to yourself, I don't quite know who's paying for all of this, because it's part of the service that I'm offering, but it's difficult to put it on your timesheet. You can put it on there as specifications or whatever, but principally what you're doing is you're a jobbing builder. You've got to get on with doing your building, and all the admin stuff gets a bit kind of separated sometimes. And you know, if you're using the same people and the same jobs, they pretty know what they're doing. They can look at the mix and say, oh yeah, I remember this one, this was. This added material that we put in, some people call it, that material, that stuff there, refer to it as a pozzolan. And the Romans found that if they used an ingredient which was ground up material, which I believe, I'm not sure, came from a place in Italy called pozzolan. It was volcanic dust, rock, ash, whatever. But they found if they ground that up and they put it in with their lime mixes, it gave them a certain kind of set, which means that they can build aqua courses and aqueducts and viaducts and harbours and all that kind of stuff. So they knew exactly what they were doing. Right, folks, we've just we just made a putty mortar there. Health and safety again, gloves, goggles, boots, trousers. It's not so essential in my mind to have a mask on when you're actually doing this one, because the putty is actually embedded in the putty is in water, and so you haven't got any airborne dust. But even so, I think I'd still wear a mask when I was doing that. It's essential to wear a mask when you're dealing with NHL. This is naturally hydraulic bag lime, and essential when you're using quick lime. But what I wanted to show you first of all was a couple of books that I've got here, because I didn't think I did a very good job, to be perfectly honest, about the life cycle down there. So I've just had a quick look at it, and we've got two books here. This is Lime Works. As you can see, credit to the author and the title, which is an extremely good book. And this is the lime cycle here. So this explains it quite well. Just take my leaf out. So here we've got your natural limestone, which we've got down there, which we showed you, that big chunk. You break it up and you put it in the top of the kiln. And then you add your fuel, and you do it in layers, set fire to it. And then you rake out your quick lime, which is this one here, that one, out of the bottom, and then you add water to it and you get steam, and from here you can make your hot lime mortar by adding sand, as it's got there, and then you from here to add in water, and then you slake it and you make lime putty, which is what we were talking about in the tub that I just used. And then it's ready for plastering, lime wash and bricklaying, and then everything evaporates out of it, and I can't read that, I've got my glasses. Carbon dioxide goes back in again. You end back with limestone, which is basically what I was saying. You end up with chalk back in your wall again. And then we've got another version of it here, which is in using natural finishes. This is an excellent book, I have to say, by Adam and Katie. And here I've got my leaf. This is a little bit easier to understand. I mean, you can make these things so bloody complicated. No wonder I keep getting messed up. Here we're dealing with non-hydraulic lime cycle. So here's your pure limestone, which we showed you, that big chunk that fell off the wall. And then you've limestone burning. So this is when it's in the kiln. And then you've got quick lime comes out the bottom of it, calcium oxide. And then you add water to it, which is the slaking process. And then you've got your building lime. And then I can't see what that says there. Can you read that?
Mixing with other aggregates.
Yep, and then you get your fresh mortar, and then the various elements are released out of it, and other elements are taken in, and then that's when your mortar hardens, and then it's gone back in the full cycle back to pure limestone again. So I think you just have to have a look at this and try and understand it, because it's people can make it terribly confusing. But these two people, I have to say, have simplified it. Simplified it. But that's basically what we're working at. We're trying to get chalk back into the building so that it has the ability to release moisture, and it's essential. And then you won't get failing brickwork and big damp patches, because it's all being released. Now we've made our putty mix. Now we're going to make an NHL mix, and for this one I really ought to wear a face mask. So I'm going to just hold it to my face for a moment so that I can still talk and breathe, hopefully. Yep, okay. Right. So that's full. Now we're going to do 2 sand. I don't need my mask on for the sand really. There's no kind of... This sand's slightly wet anyway, it's got a slight amount of moisture in it, so there's no airborne. Right, we'll do 2 of those. Then we'll add some water.
How much water?
I'm not sure really, but we'll give it a go. If I do the same quantity with water, we don't have to put it all in. We won't need this much. It's best when you're knocking it up to spin it up first of all. So what we'll do is we'll spin it. Come on little darling, work for me. And as I say, in the process of manufacturing this, it's air blown, so it's had a certain amount of moisture put into it to make it into a dust. But lots of conservation officers don't, in historic England, don't like dealing, as I say, with NHL bag lime. Their preference would be, I suppose, with putty. Not many people, as I say, use quicklime, except me. Now we'll add some water into this and see how we go. So if I put in half of what we've got, that's too much because it's going to be too wet now. So when you're working with this stuff, it's best to kind of put in small amounts because it's always deceiving you. You think, so, oh my God, that'll never be enough. But you can always add more, and it's difficult to take. You can't take it out. But all you can do is put more sand with it, more pozzolan, and possibly more lime, and then you end up with a mix which is too large. But this is pretty much the same way you'd knock cement up. It's getting a bit tighter now because it's using up some of this stuff in the margin here. So let's use my stick. As I say, this is just a length of maybe 2x1. My son James just fashioned a handle on the top. So again, we
so the colour that it would come out is determined by the sand.
It's by the sand, yeah. So this mortar mix would come out pretty much the same because the white putty or the white NHL or the white quicklime is only white, and the sand would take up the colour. So I have used in some places where there's been a lot of red, where you've got red sand, and you know, when you think of all the different, even down on Isle of Wight, Black Gang Chine, you get about 12 different colours of sand. So if you were doing a job which had to be regionally of importance, you'd want to try and match your mortar to the local sand, because when these buildings were built back in the day, you use what was ever local. You're not going to transfer sand halfway across the country, which is why it's a bit odd using southwest pit sand or charred. It's so far away from where we are, and it seems more sensible to use Thames estuary sand because we're on the River Thames here, or, as I said, Westerham sand, which is Kent. Lots of the lime in London would have come from the Chislehurst caves. They were excavated by the, God knows who, probably the Romans I would have thought, if they're found, and then they were used as, you can still visit the Chislehurst caves today. That's right, yeah. Well worth a visit actually, especially when you know about lime, you suddenly say, oh my God, of course. And with the Chislehurst caves, you'll find that there was a statue of a person down there, and they said, do you know what his sack is called on his back? I remember James grabbing my hand and saying, Dad, you know this? And I looked down at him and I was lost for words. I was so kind of welled up with emotion, so I missed the moment. But what it actually was, the bag he had by his side was a knapsack. And it's called a knapsack because it's where you keep your napped flint. And you'll find flint where there's chalk. So we've got a big chunk of flint down there, for example. And you can see the white around the outside of the flint is where the lime was gripping it, but that would have been some form of algae or some kind of layer, strata of material that was compressed, and because it was different to the sediments of the animal bones and the calcium, it comes out as flint. Same age, 280 million years or 200 million years old. I won't argue over the odd million years. Very old. I think clay is 45 million years old. Slate is 160 million years old, I think. It's amazing when you start looking at on those maps that I showed you earlier on. They've got a chart at the side, and it tells you all the ages of the stone. Now when I go back to education, you can impart such a lot of knowledge to children about geology and the earth, and where you get your, for example, in Cornwall, is it Cornwall? You've got Red Ruth, and I had a friend called John Furneaux. Still have a friend called John Furneaux, and when he was a younger man, he had red hair, and his family comes from Hastings, and Furneaux is fire or furnace in French, and it's because everybody who lived around there had red hair. And basically it's from the soil, so people from Red Ruth also had red hair, and also a lot of Scottish people have red hair, and it's from the pigments that's actually in the soil. And people say this is rubbish, but it's what I understand. And if you're growing crops and produce on the ground that has this red pigment, then over a period of time there's a chance genetically you're going to pick up the colouring of the region that you were born in. Nice story. I'd like to think it was true. Come on, boy. So it needs just a little bit more water. It's good for bricklaying. And what will happen is when you top this up, the water will go to the surface because the mortar is heavier, so you get a skim of water on the top. So next time you use it, you have to go through this process of knocking it back up again. A little bit of hope. There we are. tape. We'll leave it at that for now, for a moment, and we'll have a look at it. And it's a bit wet.
Did it pass the test?
No, it's too wet.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so it needs to be a bit stiffer. So it's probably all right before I put the water in.
So if you were making this up now and you wanted to use it, what would your suggestion be? Just to add a bit more.
We can leave it to the next day and the water will evaporate. See, most of it's all right, so you know it's nearly there. But if you just put in some of this stuff in there.
So that's a choice. You can either add some mix now or just leave it overnight and it will
Re-knock it up again. This stuff, NHL2, it's not advisable. You need to knock it up and use it the day or possibly the day after. This stuff here, which is the putty, you can use that 6 months afterwards. But this, because this hasn't gone through the formal slaking process, it'll release its moisture quicker. And might set slightly harder, I don't know, but it's got slightly different properties to the putty, which is why in conservation terms it's better to go to this stuff. That's the real McCoy. This is the kind of manufactured product to make your life easier.
So if you had a choice, you'd always use putty. You personally?
Me personally, yeah. And I would use, as I say, for chimney stacks and flaunching, I would use grey lime putty. Quite difficult to get. Made from grey lime, or I'd use white lime. Not bad, not bad. It's not too bad. So those are the two options, and let's just have a look at this. So we'll put this one is stickier. If I was doing bake off now, I'd get a handshake from Paul Hollywood for this. So those are basically the two types. You can't tell any difference in them really, but I think that this one's got obviously bits of shell in it now, and this one is just the everyday NHL. That'll get you out of trouble. If you want to do a reasonably good job, you'd use this, and this is infinitely better than cement, so never use cement, use this stuff instead because it's readily available. And if you're a DIYer or if you're a homeowner and you've got a listed building, then you could use NHL2 for doing your repairs. If you want to be purist and become a bit of an anorak about it, then you can buy yourself some putty. But if you're buying putty, bear in mind that you've got most of that is water in the weight, so a bag of this will be more viable than a bag of that. Bag of this at the moment, this is 20-25. I would say in ballpark figures, 20 quid for a bag of that, 10 quid for a tub of putty. So the price is about the same. You just need different quantities because obviously you've got water in that one, but those two are pretty good mixes. Should we? Should we do that again? Did you miss that one that time?
No,
I did it too fast for you.
No,
We'll do it again.
Look at that.
Over my head? Nah. Right, so finally we'll do a hotline mix. Something I tell you what, I wouldn't advise anybody to do it because it is so bloody dangerous. I do it because I was intrigued as to how would the Georgians have done it, how would medieval man have done it, because I was obsessed by the amount of expense for travelling lime putty with water, and I didn't really want to use NHL, so I was paying quite a lot of money for tubs of lime with water. And then I thought, well, why don't I buy the quick lime and give it a go? And I just thought this is for me this is the way that particular job could run. As I say, now we can buy this in small quantities to do demonstrations like today, rather than buying a pallet of that stuff from Tarmac. Still the same manufacturers. Pallet of that stuff is 40 tubs to a pallet, so it's quite a lot of stuff to store. And then you've got to store it. You've got to make sure it doesn't get wet. and I did a little experiment. I had a bath of water, and I fashioned a little boat out of a milk carton. And I got this little boat out of a milk carton, and I filled it up with lime and stuck a little mast in it with a sail, and then I pushed it across. I got nothing else to do during the day, you can imagine, on a building site. Anyway, I made this little boat, and then I sprinkled water on it with a very fine mist. And of course, what happens with the quicklime is that it expands. And the lime expanded on this little boat to such a degree where the boat turned upside down. And I suddenly thought, that is such a liability, because this quicklime, if it was burnt at a kiln somewhere and then sent to you in a wooden barrel, and it got at sea and it got wet, then it would expand, the barrels would split, the boat would turn upside down, so you'd have a major disaster. So it's an interesting product, and the more I work with it, the more I learn about it. But I think only if you were experienced at what you were doing and you felt confident that you could work with that, is worth a try. But we'll show you now how to do it, but it's dangerous. Right, great. We've done our lime putty, we've done our NHL. Now we're going to do the lime one, and as I say, very dangerous. This is what they put on plague pits or on animals to dissolve them. It will dissolve people in a pit of quicklime. But that's what we're dealing with. And when people say, why on earth are you dealing with such a dangerous material? And you think to yourself, it's no more dangerous than cooking with a deep pan chip fryer. It's the same level. You've got to be cautious, you've got to be aware of what you're doing and the possible dangers that you're dealing with. And it is a building site, and we are working with difficult materials to get our mortar mixed, but you have to be very careful. And as you see, I've got my gloves on, got my glasses on. I haven't got a respirator on at the moment. I think we'll do the sand first of all. And the difference with this mix is that you use 3-to-1, because the lime, as I mentioned about my little boat, the lime expands. So we want 3 sand to 1 mix. Now this is a very small mix that we're doing. You have to bear in mind that sometimes most of the mixes we do one tub of lime, one of these tubs of quicklime, to 3 tubs of sand. So we make a huge mound. And this is the kind of, as far as I'm concerned, the traditional kind of Georgian way of doing it, because they didn't have any metal dustbins at hand. But we'll do 1 mix in this, and then we'll do 1 in dustbin, and we'll see how we go. So sand first of all. Have to do it on a board, don't do it on plastic, it'll melt it. This will get to 1,000 degrees in a matter of seconds. We used a monitor at one stage, kind of turkey monitor, you put in the turkey, see if it's cooked, and the thermometer melted. Didn't work out very well. Unsatisfactory. So I think what we'll do is one of those. Maybe do 2 of those. And as I say, I'm normally dealing with a big sandcastle job, and I can kind of this is a weeny little kind of pizza of a job we've got going here. The bucket trowel is shaped so that you can get into the corners of the bucket. So I'm going to make a hole in the middle, and then we're going to build a volcano. Build Mount Vesuvius. Actually, I think what I'll do is put a mask on. You normally have this strapped to your head, but hey. Do you like it? Do you like the knee technique? Right. So we're going to put our quick lime in the middle. Immediately going to get another bag of sand ready. So that's our 3 to 1. And then we have water.
Wow, feel the heat steaming up. That is incredible.
What we do, put this one over the top, close it down, and then we make a little sand castle of it, like that. And you see what's happening is the lime is expanding with the heat. So it's cracking them a little. So I want to keep all that heat in there for now. And what we would do is we would normally leave this overnight. And we're doing this in the centre of London, in safe conditions obviously, but the reason I mentioned the centre of London is because when we came back the following morning, foxes have been sleeping on it, and that's what you find in the countryside is that foxes will make their way to your lime and they'd sleep on it because it would give, especially if you're doing it in late in the year like we are now. As a word of caution, I wouldn't do any lime work after October. We're in October now, so if you're doing it internally, it's fine. Doing it externally, it's going to take 28 days for the lime to cure, where it's still vulnerable, and so you have to cover it with hessian. You have to look after it, sheet it up, make sure that it's not prone to frost, because that will destroy your mix and you'll have to start all over again. But this little darling here is getting ready, and then I'd normally put a little bit more sand on there, thin coming out of it.
I can't believe how warm that is.
Yeah, if you put your hand on that bit there.
Wow. Oh my, that's incredible.
Yeah. So what we would do is to leave that until tomorrow, and then what will happen is that the sand will start opening up with the heat as it dries the sand out, and then when you come back tomorrow you'll find all those granules, you can see it happening already, all those granules have turned to dust. You see that? So we don't want any lumps in this. We come back tomorrow, it's opening up again now, you see the heat. We'll come back tomorrow and that'll be ready to turn over, and I'll show you one that we've already done, because once we've turned it over we can put it in a metal dustbin and we spin it up with the spinner, as I've shown you how to do the other ones. If we come over here, son, this is one we've knocked up the other day. As I say, it has to be stored in a metal bin, and that's what it looks like once it's tomorrow when we come back. It'll be like that, and this is ready now, and this will stay like this with a lid on it. It'll be perfectly all right. That'll stay like that until we decide to mix it up, and we'll be using this within the month.
So that won't get hot when you put water on that. When you
It'll get hot again when you reactivate it, but not to the same degree it has before. So you still would have to mix this up in a metal tub.
Wow.
Now if we were slaking lime, if we wanted to make lime putty, what we would do is to we'll put the rest of this tub in here. Okay, put that in there. Right, stand back. Pretty much getting up to 800 degrees, that one. It takes up the water, you see, and then expands, and that will now start turning to putty. And what you do is you leave that. See, first of all it turns to powder, and then it'll turn to the more water you add.
Is that because the chalk's absorbing water?
That's right, because what's happened is, because it's been in a kiln, it's driven off all the water, so there's no water content in it, and it's taking it back up again. So if you put it on a human hand and flesh, it would dissolve it, and because it wants, you know, we're something like 90% water, I think, aren't we? 90% water. You can touch the bottom of the. Careful. Like putting your hand on the kettle. So it's the same kind of heat. So what we'll do is we'll leave that to make our putty. And what we could do, of course, is as just a variant on the theme, which is what I have done and sometimes do. That's because I'm a little bit cavalier with my mortar mixes, because I know what I'm doing. What you could do is, this would make pure putty, so by the time you've left this in here for 2 years or a few months or whatever, you'd end up with like that tub of white putty that I showed you. But if you chuck your sand in with this now, that's not the fire alarm going off, that's my son using his power tools upstairs. So if you have a look at this now, son. If we left this now, and then tomorrow he'll be doing exactly the same as that. But you have to do it in a metal tub, otherwise it'll melt it. James, my son, was using it, and I said, "How'd you get on then, James?" He said, "Oh, Dad, I used a plastic tub." And I said, really? And he said, yeah, if I put it in at the right time and spin it around, it loses its heat before it melts the tub. Then I came back the next day and the tub was in pieces. It's like holes all around it, like a piece of Swiss cheese. Didn't get that one right. But almost, but you can, you know, if you're careful you can do it. So that's enough for that now. So what we'll do is we'll leave that until tomorrow. But as I say, once we spun it up, it'll look like this in this. Yeah. And we'll add all that tomorrow together, and then we've got a usable mortar. And then by the time we've tomorrow, once this has lost all its heat, both of these, and that, I think I'll be tempted to spin it up in a metal container. But that's where James was putting it into one of these plastic tubs, and then spin it up in the tub because it lost its heat. And you can do that, but beware, you might melt your tub, which is why I prefer to do it in the dustbin to begin with. Just the same as this here, and that's a really good. That's a good mix. And this is, you'll notice that I put the lime putty in there and the NHL, and I'm doing some brickwork in the basement, so it's not too important. It's also my basement, So it's not as though I'm doing a mongrel mix of NHL bag lime and lime putty and mixing them together for a client, because I wouldn't do that. But for me in the basement, I think it'll be fine. So I will use this in the next few days, and it's a good sloppy mix there for bricklaying. Perfect. So that, my friends, is pretty much the story of lime mixing. So I hope you've enjoyed it. As I say, lime putty is fun. Hey, fun to use. NHL, at a push, we'd use it. This house has been repointed purely with lime putty and hot lime. And hot lime, really, you need to know what you're doing. But be careful, you know, it is dangerous. And even though you think it's inert, you might find a bit on your clothes and you don't want to touch your eyes or get, you know, it will, look, it's still smoking, so it's dangerous stuff. But anyway, I think that's been a pretty good guide to hot lime and lime putty and NHL. Any questions, then come back to Unique Properties on the website or the email, and we'll see how we go. And if you've enjoyed this and you feel as though it's beneficial and informative, then we'll do one on bricklaying, one on plastering and joinery, and work right the way through the process of making the hand-built house, which all these Georgian properties were. Thank you. Right, here we are this afternoon. We're looking at the mix we knocked up yesterday, so I've just sheeted it up to keep some of the heat in and stop the rainwater affecting it. These are the old sand sacks. We just split those and put those over the top. Well, you can see where it's expanded and where the lime has done its job. Important thing, you need your goggles, 2 different types of goggles. You need your ventilator and you need your gloves. So we'll start with the gloves. Right, we're going to turn it over with a bucket trowel and then we're going to tub it up, and then we're going to spin it up. Goggles and ventilator. Get everything out of the way. Or you just need to compress all the sand if there's any lumps of sand and lumps of lime. That's pretty well turned over. You can see all the quick lime, the white powdery stuff here. It went in as stone and it's come out as a powder. Right, I'm going to tub it up. We'll come back to this in a minute when we've got this topped up, I think. Okay, now we've got it all topped up in a plastic tub, because there still might be some residual heat in it and you don't want to melt your tub. You can do it in a dustbin. A number of ways you can do it. I quite like the tub because it doesn't stick to the tub. So that's pretty well mixed through, and then when you've got to this stage you add your water. Don't forget you can always add more water, but you can't take it out. I've taken my ventilator off for this exercise, just so that I can talk to you. Still around my neck, just in case I need it in an emergency. What we'll do is we'll come back to this, I think, in a few minutes' time when I've knocked it up and had a cup of tea. It'll start loosening itself up in a moment, and then we can have a look at the mix. So we'll come back to that in a second. Right, so we've been knocking this up for a couple of minutes. I've added a bit more water, and then it got too sloppy, and then I knocked it up again. It's quite solid again, quite stiff. So we're getting somewhere with what we need, but you just got to keep wielding it. You keep working it until it yields. And when it yields, you'll suddenly think to yourself, oh God, this has gone into a really nice, malleable kind of muddy mix that you feel as though you can work with. You need it a bit looser if it's plastering, a bit stiffer if it's brickwork. But what we're going to do is we might spin this up in a minute with a spinner that you've seen me use before. If you can just keep focus on that for a second, I'll show you the spinner. We can use the spinner, and that just kind of gyrates it. We'll do that in a minute, but we don't have to do that on camera. You can do this I know that in Germany back in the day they'd use an oil drum, cut the oil drum in half, and they'd work around the oil drum like this, well actually with a shovel. So they'd work around the oil drum by turning it over. And the good thing is that you've got a metal rim around the oil drum, and it turns the edge over, and you can roll your shovel over on it, so you keep turning it over. But you have to keep turning it over, and importantly, you have to compress it together. Now, I've mentioned before that you can get mechanical rollers, that's flat pan rollers that go around in a circle with a wheel on it that compress it. You can also use a cement mixer. And somebody told me you can actually cut out the fins in a cement mixer and then put in a football full of concrete, and it'll just roll around and it'll compress it. But I think in all the experience that we've had with knocking up lime, we normally manage to do it with a spinner and to compress it by hand like this. So I think we'll keep with this for now, because you can end up with just too much plant on site. But each to his own. Everybody has their own method of doing it, and you have to do what you feel comfortable with. And also you have to do what you need to do for the volume that you need to make. So let's just see how stiff this is. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, so it's a pretty good mix. And what I would just show you is, come down here. We've put some on the trail here, I think. So we've got quite a lot of aggregate in here, and we've also got quite a lot of bits of slate material, which is that. So that still hasn't slaked yet, so that's still pop. So you've got to be really careful when you're plastering with this, because you have to make sure that all these pieces of slaked lime have actually expanded and taken up the water. Otherwise, if you put it in your mix, particularly if you're doing plastering, if you're doing first coat or second coat, the temptation is for this lime to suddenly expand in the plaster, and it'll blow the finish off, because it just kind of cracks and expands, as I say, takes up the water. And you have to spray down your plaster when you're working with it to keep it active. And obviously the more you water it, the more chance this lime is going to actually expand. Would I use this for plastering? I think if we tub this up and leave it long enough with a film of water over the top of it in one of the plastic buckets, I think I'd probably use it for plastering, certainly for base coats. If you're plastering, you've also got to hair it. You don't want to hair it, that's putting the horsehair in it, and we'll cover that when we're doing plastering. But you don't want to put the horsehair in too early, because this is quite an aggressive caustic material, and this will actually dissolve horsehair. So you want to do that right at the end, but this will stay in its active state now for quite a few months until we get round to using it. But as I say, ideal for brickwork, because the lime, if you use this, it would expand in the joint and make your brick joints tighter, and it's good for when you're doing stone walling, and if you're using, there's still a bit of heat in that actually, still a bit of heat in that. I know that in Scotland and in Ireland they use a hot lime mix like this, they knock it up, and they will actually start laying bricks with the lime in this condition that we have here. Note, I've got my gloves on. That's getting quite warm. So the lime is still expanding, so when you've got that in your brick joint, you'll find that you'll get a nice tight wall, especially if you're using stonework. And I was told that in Scotland, because the weather conditions are so adverse, they quite like working with hot lime because it keeps them a bit warmer. As far as when would you do this, all lime work I think is has to have enough time to carbonate, and it takes 28 days for this to go off. So we're talking about a period of time. We're running in October now. Would I be laying bricks externally in London in this? Maybe, but certainly not in the countryside or in Scotland or Ireland, mainly because you get adverse weather conditions and it will affect the lime. It could freeze, for example. So you really want to be doing lime work, I would have said in the first January, February, March. I'd avoid that. March, April, May is a good time. And then you've got the whole of the summer and the autumn for it to take up water and release water and to settle down. And then there's no chance of it freezing. The problem for that is, of course, if you're a building contractor and you're doing work and you've got scaffolding up and you're repointing, and you're repointing too late in the year, then if it fails, you've got to put your scaffolding back up and you've got to come back and do more expensive work. So if we can just come down here and have a look at this here, for example. So here you can see we've got bits of lime in there and bits of aggregate. But we will be covering this again when we do bricklaying, and we will be covering this again when we do plastering. But this is basically the end of the process for making mortar from quicklime, from a hot lime mix. So I hope that's been of help to you. If you have any queries or suggestions, then please leave it on the reviews below, and we look forward to doing the next technical day. So thank you very much, and that's me over and out. Time for a cup of tea. Thank you.
Right then, folks, as Stephen said, that's it. Sign off done on the first practical living with listed video. What did you think? I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have enjoyed watching it, filming it. I've learnt more than I ever thought I would do. And who knew lime was such a detailed subject and topic? So I'd like to say again, thank you to Stephen for this demonstration and all the hard work and all the practical stuff he's gone into. There will be others. There will be other videos that we'll be putting together. As Stephen said, drop us a comment below, let us know what you think and what you would like to know about the practicalities of the whole process of building with conservation and historic homes in mind. So that's it, that's sign off for now. I think just one thing before I do go, I just want to reiterate what Stephen said. Always approach this with caution, always do this with the right gear. If there's any questions or you have anything you'd like to know about the detailed side of it from a safety point of view, please contact us. You can contact me directly, simon@uniqueproperty.tv, or drop a comments below and we'll respond as soon as we possibly can. And if you are, very importantly, on the if you're looking for some building work in terms of somebody specialist to carry out the work, if this is not something you'd want to entertain yourself, Stephen's son James has taken over the Heritage Building Conservation Company and is moving forward with that. So if you'd like to speak to somebody from a build point of view, contact me and I'll put you in touch with James directly. So thanks again. See you on the next tour, or see you on the next video. Until then, take care.